that was like said, there are 1,000 ways to do a scene. There are 10 ways that it's going to be good. Just pick one.
Mm-hmm.
You learn by doing and finishing things. Like, you can overthink stuff too much, but like and you know this from the work you've done. When you actually complete something, how much you've learned because you had a thing to create in front of you.
If anyone wants to start something, just get to it, get down to it, and start. Start today. There is no tomorrow. That's what I say to people as well.
You're dealing with a bigger studio with 8 levels of executives. You gotta and how that can change.
I can relate to this. I know where you're coming from.
All the time, right?
Hello and welcome to Prolific Perspective. This is Kamal Hassan, your host and founder of Prolific Animation Studio. We are all about exploring innovation, entrepreneurship, and how to be successful. Today we have an amazing guest with us, an award-winning film producer and a director and a CEO of Womo Studio, Mike Owens. Hey Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks.
All right, Mike. So give your brief introduction to our audience, please.
I'll try to keep it brief. So I've been working in animation for coming on 30 years now. Started my last semester of college in Chicago. My career has been completely in character-based entertainment animation. And I've never lived in LA. Like, it's been I'm from the East Coast. My entire career has been in the Midwest. And my career started, my first gig was working on the original Animaniacs. I've worked on commercials. I've worked on a lot of different things. Worked on on the short film Hair Love that won an Oscar a few years back with some friends from Chicago. I've done things for live sort of performances, kids shows, adult shows, mostly comedy-based stuff, educational stuff. Currently, my partner Wendy and I started a studio called Womo Studio that we run out of our lovely home here. And mostly still working in entertainment, education, working with creators sort of on a global scale, and a range of big projects to small projects. But mostly, like, our main tag for Womo is storytelling by any media necessary. So we've done comic books, animation, video editing. It's all about storytelling and character for us. So I'm doing it for, like I said, coming on 30 years, and somehow I'm still doing it.
And what about, give your brief, on the Yo Gabba Gabba show and, other achievements. But I've been reading up about you, and I was reading about, you've been an Emmy award-winning producer and director for an original Amazon series, Danger and X. So story about that and, your efforts and what were the challenges you were facing when you were producing that series for Amazon?
Okay. That was an adventure. So that was Danger and X started from a concept of the character Philip, who's the big 6-foot paranoid egg in the show. Just the character I've been playing around with for a while. When I was working at a studio here in Minneapolis called Puny Entertainment, they were developing in-house projects. So I brought Philip in to pitch for a short film we were going to make. Working with a local improv comedy troupe for the voices, where they were going to improvise the story, and we would make a film around that. And the studio all pitched ideas. The improv group called Splendid Things, a huge theater here in Minneapolis. They gravitated towards Philip as a character, and we just let them run with the story. We talked about what the inspiration was. I worked with the studio heads to develop the show into some sort of concept, but we just went with it. We wanted to create original content. That was fun. It went really well. It was darker than the show turned out to be. It was it's just this giant chicken that destroys a city, kind of like Godzilla, and Philip comes out of the cloaca of that chicken to save realize that his mother just sort of destroyed everything. So that idea and that character of Philip, this sort of this paranoid character, who's super fragile but has to sort of go out into the real world was the base of the character. So we developed it to a pitch after the short. Um, because we were working with Cartoon Network and Disney, doing a lot of development work with those guys. So we had some ins. But it took 6 years of pitching for that show to get picked up. And we were sort of, yeah. So persistence and failure has been like our motto for that one. Just because, pitching is, well, first of all, we were learning to pitch by doing it. Like our first pitch was just, a document full of words, full of descriptions, just, it wasn't working. And by the time it got picked up 6 years later, it was some advice from different people at Nickelodeon to add Dee Dee, which is to add a second character. Um, sort of something for Philip to play off of. But by the time we went from all words pitch, we went to a very visual pitch and barely any words, and it was all about character design and just like right away being able to see the show. And that timed out perfectly with at the time Amazon was doing a thing called the pilot program, where they would develop they developed I think 10 at the time pilots. It wasn't a competition, but they were going to fund pilots for 10 ideas, and they picked Danger and Eggs as one of the pilots. So Amazon funded that. We made that all here. We were able to get some voices. We kept the voices. That was the other thing. The original improv voice actor,
Hmm.
Eric Noble, who did Philip, was so perfect for the gig that when it came to develop with Amazon, we had to um, rally behind to keep him because he wasn't like a big movie star, but he's the perfect voice. Like it couldn't be anyone else. They fell for it. And we got to keep him. So we made this
Uh-huh.
pilot with a small team. We worked with Amazon, paired us up with a studio in South Korea
So,
to do the
so for,
production.
for 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 the pilot, was that those like 2D animatics, like concept arts and all, or was that a like complete auto episode or pilot episode
Yeah,
that you pitched to Amazon?
yeah, we had like the original pitch deck. The
Hmm.
first step of developing this pitch, once it was selected by that, we had to go through another process of writing a script, doing an animatic, and coming and having a design, like a Bible for the show. And then
Okay.
that was like round two, right?
Okay.
So once that got picked, they fully funded a complete beginning to end pilot, full animation. That's the first episode in the series. Like it's still,
Because we
the
are
one.
working on one project. We are working on one project right now. We took an inspiration from the Larry Sanders show back in the 90s.
Mhm.
That crazy thing. So we took an inspiration from there, and we are making a pilot episode that we are planning to, pitch it to Netflix or Amazon. But
Yeah,
we haven't planned that yet because I'm more towards the marketing side of content, not on the long form side of content. So,
yeah.
Mike, if I talk about Womo Studio, what inspired you transition from working in established studios and co-founding Womo Studios?
Yeah, I've worked for a bunch of places, mostly small studios. I've never worked for a giant studio. I've worked with big studios, but I've always worked in sort of small boutique studios.
Mhm.
My partner Wendy, who's also we're married, we had met working on Animaniacs back in the mid '90s.
Okay.
She was an animator, worked on Animaniacs, Tiny Toons, bunch of things. Um, and we, as the ups and downs of a career in anything creative, and especially animation, especially in the Midwest, it was tough for two people to both be, you know, sh- hustling for that kind of work, and be able to like live indoors and eat and all those things.
Yeah.
Uh, so, Wendy, being sort of jack of all trades, worked her way into marketing. Then she was a video producer at a science museum here in Minnesota. Filming eagles in their nests out of helicopters and going to Mayan pyramids and all this kind of stuff. Um, so storytelling in her own way while I was still doing animation, and then we. Just felt like we needed to, after knowing each other for 20 years, we should come together and try to make something, of our own with what we've learned over the years. So she left the museum. I was freelance at the time. So we decided to just get together with the history that we had, the clients that we had, the work that we had, and start Womo Studio. And we started that by making, which we're still making, a short film because we didn't have clients right away. But so we just wrote this. Wendy had this character named Rizdal who's in love with love. He loves things too much and too hard. And so we wrote this short film together in a day with post-it notes, and then made the animatic, started producing it and work on that in between things. And then work started coming in. Like I can't say we've like had a big marketing plan, but it's, my whole career, our whole careers have been word of mouth more than the, having a separate marketing team. Like it's literally the two of us and we hire up based on the size of a production. But that keeps overhead small. It keeps us very
So as you
agile.
just
So we can,
mentioned, that initially you did not have any clients. So
yeah,
what it really takes in animation industry to have like good clientele with you who can get you enough fundings to produce something, is that really PR, connections, word of mouth, or what exactly? What does it
yeah,
really
for
take?
yeah, for me, it's been uh, doing good work, delivering that work on time and on budget, and connections, word of mouth. Like if you I've had two job interviews in 30 years. It's all been word of mouth for me because we both know what it takes to get something as complicated as an animation production done. Um, and just the art of finishing something can go a long way. And like finishing something that's good is just an extra bonus because it being such a collaborative art form, if the people that you're around and make stuff with are good to be around in that intense environment of creating something collaboratively to feel like one brain and one voice, um, people want to reconnect with you and they want to make stuff with you again. I mean, working on Hair Love was this only reason I got that because I went to school with the guy who directed it. But we followed each other's careers and like we boosted each other over the years and then just reconnected by never fully breaking off that connection. It's you never know when like things are going to cross. So it's being in the Midwest and being sort of out of the hub of it. I'd have to show up in LA every once in a while, or I'd have to pop up at a festival or pop up at a thing. Um, and try to be memorable. Uh, I guess really and I think we're probably different than other studios, especially ones in town that do have marketing and do that hustle of looking for clients. But where you've been able to stay in this sort of niche of entertainment, character-based stuff, based on the work we've done and how we performed in a crew. So that
Mark,
it's a
me-
reputation for
yeah, as you just mentioned about the budget, so is it really hard to stick to the budgets and the timelines when you initially start the project? You decide a certain budget, let's say I talk about $500,000 funding to a project. Is it really hard to stick to that budget? Because I belong to the same niche. So I know sometimes it's very hard to manage your profit and margins at the same time as sticking to the budgets and the timelines of a specific project. So is it really hard to stick to the budgets or it's manageable?
it can be manageable, and that's part of the thing of like I think why people want to work with us is because we understand that side of it. Like we're firm believers that anything can be created for any budget. It's setting the proper creative expectations for it. And you spend all that time are you going to have 50 characters? You're going to have two. Is there going to be camera moves or not? Is it going to be a hand drawn style? Is it going to be a puppet style? Like all of those things, all that thought that goes into it in the early development stage informs that budget, right? And every project has its own challenges and its own roadblocks. And then, if you're dealing with a bigger studio with 8 levels of executives, you got to manage how that can change, but like things
I
can
can
change.
relate to this. I can relate to this. I know where you're
It
coming from.
happens all the time, right? And like you,
Yeah.
you have to anticipate that, like even when you're negotiating how you're going to work on a project, of how many retakes there are going to be, because and like be clear about what stage of review, like what is it we're looking for. Like I don't need audio notes when I'm looking at design or animatic, so being clear about at a certain point, there's no turning back, and So sort of being able to see the big picture, keeping your head on the minutia and everything all at the same time is kind of the skill of this business, right? Because you're working literally on one frame at a time, but you're also looking at everything that comes in between and all the egos and all the creativity and all the brains and all the money that has to come together. So you spend that upfront time. Um, like with Danger and Eggs, like it was like my whole storyboard crew. No one had worked in animation before except for me and maybe one other person. They were all comic book artists. But my partner and I, we were able to on the show. Um, we had people to help us to inform us. We had some Amazon brought some experts in to help us write a pipeline, but developing the right pipeline and setting creative expectations off the bat, because can really help you stick to it. It almost inevitably goes off the rails a little bit. Like you always expect a little bit of chaos, and so like you plan for it. You put in, you plan for how many reviews going to be. After a certain point, if you can change it all you want, but then suddenly the price goes up.
Absolutely.
And so you just
But
write
but
that
but
in.
sometimes this is coming from the client. Sometimes it's us being a director or a producer or a creator. We get into a roller coaster. We bug our team and ping our team all the time. Okay, redo this and redo that. I don't like it because I'm
Yeah,
that kind of a person. I sit down with the team. I go to the field. I talk to them, and sometimes I ask them to redo 10 times for a specific thing before I present it to a client. So
yeah,
you do the same
yeah,
with your team? Yeah. Mhm.
yeah. You have to learn to cut it off at a certain point. I had advice from a director once that was like said, there are 1,000 ways to do a scene. There are 10 ways that it's going to be good. Just pick one. At a certain point you sort of have to like it takes a while to develop it, but like just trusting your gut on a certain level, because perfection is a good goal, but it's unattainable, right? So like
Absolutely.
because a certain point when you're so close to something, it's really hard. Like this may seem like that little wiggle of a line might be the biggest deal to you. No one's going to notice it, and sort of like learning to step back. And I mean, it takes me a long time to watch anything I've done once it's over,
Hmm.
because all I can think about is the stress and like the things I let slip by and the things I could have fixed. uh, but it's a certain point of just what I'm asking of clients, that like this many reviews I have to ask of myself in a position of a director or producer, is to, I set a level of quality that I'm going for, but I have to respect the timeline, the budget, and the sanity of my crew.
All right, Mike. So, what does it really take to build a strong lasting relations with big names like Amazon, Netflix, and Apple TV?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. And like again, these things are nothing I went out and like hustled to pursue. It's because I worked with people who ended up at these places. Um, at the guy who is the executive on the pilot of Danger and Eggs is now at Netflix. So like, and he remembered having a great working relationship with me during Danger and Eggs.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff is remembered, right?
Hmm.
So it's there's it's again it's personal connections, doing the good work, but also once I'm in it, it's like, oh my god, Netflix, oh my god, Apple. But getting past that, oh my god, it's Netflix, and oh my god, it's Apple, we're like, we're all kind of like trying to just do good work. And
Absolutely.
we all know we're all in our places because we have our skills. You need people that are good at one thing, that are good at another thing. Everyone has things to say about executives, but a good executive who has your back goes a long way. And it's just being, honest and realizing we're all in it together kind of approach. And so
Hmm.
getting past the intimidation factor, it took me, I had to consciously do it. And like, I try to remember everyone's names, who did what, who produced what. Like I'd be on the
Hmm.
Uber ride over to the meetings,
Hmm.
um, just trying to like, sound impressive and just like,
Hmm.
know who I'm talking to, doing my research of who I'm talking to. But that realizing that we're all creative humans trying to do something cool, um, takes away that intimidation. And then it's all kinds of things are possible after that. So it's what you do with the connection for me versus how to get to the connection, because sometimes I don't even, my path has been very strange. I can't really prescribe a way to get there, but it's what you do with it when it's in your lap. Do you put in the time? Do you, push yourself a little bit more? Are you honest without being a pain in the ass? Are you, are you willing to step back from your own ego at certain points? It's, whatever you're doing collaboratively takes the best of us as human beings to do, right? And so it's no different in animation or government or building a bridge or any of those things. Like trusting the people around you, being honest with those that are, maybe this person is making it difficult or tearing it down, but not shit talking that person, or like, being that sort of like trying to tear other people down, because everyone has their way into the world and into this business. So you just don't work with those people anymore, and you be very diplomatic about it.
Hmm.
But it's I don't know if that's answering the question, but because
Uh,
I don't like, I didn't actively seek out Netflix. It's just that I had people I've worked with earlier in my career who rose to that position, who remembered working with us and said, "Come on in." Um, the working with Apple on Yo Gabba Gabba, in the original iteration of Yo Gabba Gabba, when I was working at Puny, where we developed the Danger and Eggs at the studio here, we did all the animation for Yo Gabba Gabba back then because they just put this ad out. We needed an animator to for $2,000 a week, whatever. And as a studio of like 8 people, the owners just said, "We'll do it. We've
hmm
got other work to keep us alive." And so we became this trusted source of, we could do it for a budget that was, it was a Midwest budget versus an LA budget. Um, there was, we were relatively new, so there was a risk on their part, but they were so creative. The team from Gab is so creative. They're creators of it, and they knew that they were asking a lot. So like there was give and take there, but there was a shared vibe of what our inspirations, what our tastes were. So it's and then when they got this revamp to do it on Apple, they reached out to Puny. Puny is disbanded since, but then they found out that I had directed a bunch of stuff for GABA, from the animation within it to shorts to doing the animation part of their live show. Like it wasn't just me, but I was involved in it. They just hadn't known who I was. So the producer reached out to me. I had done a bunch since then, since I last talked to them, and I had to make a case for myself, and for Womo, that we know the show, we know the characters, we can do it in a way that you can't do it in LA, price wise. Like we can definitely do it for a good budget. And my sort of strange path and the connections Wendy and I have made, we have this sort of global, we found these like global pockets of cool people doing cool things that weren't LA. And so I was like, I can bring that with us to the show,
hmm
because
hmm
we produced 25 individual shorts that were all in the artist's style, which is unheard of,
hmm
and so it was, they weren't giant budgets, but they were decent budgets.
Okay.
So that trade-off of creative input, versus money, you can find that nice balance of like, if I have to do something I hate, you better pay me a lot of money. I'll take
Absolutely.
less money if you trust me creatively. So it's again what you do with it when it's in your lap.
Absolutely. So, how do you balance your Midwest lifestyle with high-profile, globally connected career? Like as you just mentioned about LA,
Yeah,
Midwest, a lot of time. So, how do you manage?
it's I don't say it's easy, but it's because the quality of life and cost of living here is less than being in LA or being in New York, but having connections in all these other places, we don't have to, and having a studio that's the two of us and we hire staff based on project, our overhead is so low that we can like not work for a couple months. Like we don't have to take work just to keep the lights on. So we take high profile projects, be really smart and use our experience to like use the budget wisely so that we can profit enough. And because the cost of living for what our house cost here versus what it would cost in LA, it would
It's a big
this would be,
difference. It's a big, yeah,
this would be a $2 million house, but it's,
absolutely.
we're in Minnesota. So you sort of like, are there sacrifices of not being in the mix of it? Sure. But I've been, again, been doing it this long without, I won't say without trying, but without like a hard hustle in LA. So that time, that downtime that allows you to financially survive allows us to sort of not just take anything just to stay alive. We can be like, I really want to work with that person. We just finished this Apple project, so we can take this lower budget independent children's book author and do a little something with them because we believe in the project. So it keeps us, makes our selection process and a little more, we can curate that a little bit better because we're not constantly chasing a dollar to keep a big studio open. Like when we started Lomo, it was like, do we want employees? Do we want a brick and mortar space? Do we want to work from, like, what kind of business do we want? There's sort of the dream of like having that cool space with artwork and, exposed brick and all those kind of things that have it, but like we don't have, with the pandemic and Zooms and the way remote work has become a
Hmm.
possibility, we don't need that. So making that choice to like, let's keep it small and see what happens so that we aren't overwhelmed by it and we can put our energy towards the project and not towards, stressing out over keeping the doors open and the lights on.
So if I talk about entrepreneurship and the business side, as a studio owner, how do you balance the demand of managing business with maintaining your creative focus and vision at the same
Yeah.
time?
Yeah. It's keeping, continue creating something on the side. There's stuff up all over the place. We're always doing something.
Uh-huh.
So you sort of satisfy that urge to just do things where no one's going to have feedback, and no one's going to, other than yourself. And
Hmm.
there's not any deadlines. And it could be anything from, like when he does weaving on a giant floor loom, like old school kind of that thing. I get great satisfaction out of like doing work on our old house because it's just it activates a different side of my brain, but it's still kind of creative. Like I'm learning bricklaying
Hmm.
on the side,
Hmm.
um,
Uh-huh.
but it's because it can, animation, any creative endeavor on a large scale is exhausting after a while, and it just like you give so much of it, it takes a lot out of you, so you need that rejuvenation.
Yeah.
um, so to sort of balance it, like it's less of like a businessy strategy, and then like just trying to balance it all and be
Hmm.
somewhat mentally healthy in it. Um,
Hmm.
the creative sort of outlet for things, and like we're at that point where people will come to us for the kind of styles that we do, and that's nice because that took a long time to get to that point because you're always
Hmm.
drawing someone else's style, which is great, which is fun. I've learned a lot by
Hmm.
implementing other people's styles. Um,
Hmm.
but we'll take a low end job just because they're like, Do whatever you want, we love it," and it's like, "Oh, okay."
Uh-huh.
And can we take a year and a half to do it? And they're like, "Sure,
Hmm.
fine." So like, you have that control over some of these pieces. And again, like I'm saying, I don't have a hard hustle marketing team, so I'm not constantly doing that. But I'm constantly having conversations, and I'm constantly staying connected to collaborators and partners in a somewhat casual way. Like we have partners down in Guadalajara that worked with us on Yo Gabba Gabba, and we're both developing things all the time. So we sort of keep each other. You develop something, help us out, we'll help you out with another thing. Like I'll be a story advisor, and you review their animatics while they're making their independent feature film, whatever.
Uh-huh.
So it's feeding other people in your circle, keeping those
Hmm.
relationships alive in whatever that means. And because I'm not doing commercial work or having to go to ad agencies or anything like that, I can um, reserve my time to sort of just build these personal relationships of who do I like to work with, what kind of work do
Hmm.
we like to do.
Right.
Everything else is just you know it's a unique situation, I guess, but
It
it's
is indeed.
constantly evolving, but trying to
Hmm.
craft it what makes sense
Hmm.
for us.
So, how does your approach to creating a full-length animated series and episode differ from working on short projects?
Uh, yeah, it's a long, long haul because like the consistency of it, um, yeah, it is a very different it's a very different beast and it's very intense. Because you sort of have to like ignite that magic 26 times
Hmm.
versus one time. And like with Danger and Eggs, they were 11-minute episodes. We did 26 of them, I think, 13 of them, 26. I don't know,
Uh-huh.
26, but 13.
26. Yeah.
There's two 11 minutes per episode. Um, you know, that's where the beauty of being in a place like Amazon, where like you can pull in like a whole team of great writers and voice actors and all these kind of things to sort of do that. But you need um, you need to be on it constantly. It didn't shut off. Like it, I took off 6 months after the show was done, and just like walked in the woods, like because like it just I gave everything to it. But the doing it on a short project is like, it's a sprint versus a marathon. That's you prepare differently if you're an athlete doing a sprint versus a marathon. Like it's
Hmm.
like all at once. I'm going to give all my energy, then I'm done. And I can sit back. But like I got to do this for a year and a half, so I can't. I have to pace myself, but I have to be. I have to keep moving forward. We often talk about it as like um, building the car while you're driving it, because like you can't wait till it's done because it'll never be done, it'll never be right, but it's happening, like it's in motion, you better figure it out kind of thing.
Yeah.
The deadline is coming up, so
But
just
at the end, we are humans. We make mistakes. We follow the wagon. So
yeah,
I get it. Yeah.
yeah, you
So,
just sort of put
mhm.
your best foot forward, and you surround yourself with the best people and like encourage them to do their best work and try to create that, like the Danger and Eggs storyboard crew did not work weekends. And it's like in animation, it's like that's what you do. You sleep under your desk. You work for 14 hours a day. If you want to work over the weekend, I won't stop you. But we didn't demand it to meet our deadline, and we still came in on budget, on time, because the artists were refreshed,
Hmm.
and there's a certain amount of trust giving to what they're bringing to it, and then being honest if there's a feedback to change, um, but also letting them surprise you, like, oh, that's funnier than anything I would have thought of. But
Uh-huh.
how I communicate to a team creatively and how Womo creates to the people we're working with, is a new skill that we're developing. Like you practice all the art skills, but like how to communicate clearly. Uh, is a thing you have to learn how to do. What are you asking of people? And by we've done the work, we've been in betweeners, we've been designers, we've been board artists, we've been producers, so we know what we're asking of other people. We're not just like, here's a great dream I have, do what I say. It's
Uh-huh.
knowing what I'm asking of people helps keep everyone healthy.
Got it. So, Mike, any advices to the young entrepreneurs and people who are in their early stages of their career? Because you have been into the industry, it's been almost 30 years, a lot of
Yeah.
setbacks, failures, hustle. So, share your experience, your advices with our audience so they'll learn and they'll, hustle and they'll do something in their lives as well.
Yeah. It's the one thing is be comfortable with failing. Fail often and fast, if that makes sense, because like
It does, it does, it does. Hmm.
you learn by doing and finishing things. Like you can overthink stuff too much, but like and you know this from the work you've done. When you actually complete something, how much you've learned because you had a thing to create in front of you. If you theorize about it too long, you'll never go anywhere. Another thing is to like you're starting out just as an independent artist wanting to get into it. Everyone kind of has their I want to be a storyboardist, I want to be a designer, I want to do everyone wants to do concept design. um, don't stick too hard to that. Find a way in, even if it's just a production assistant. Find your way into the community of people making stuff and the studios making stuff, because that's how that word of mouth stuff builds. Like if I got my first job working on Animax because I took an internship, doing in betweens, and doing ink and paint when digital ink and paint when it first came out, just doing
Hmm.
very repetitive stuff. I had someone come in on Danger and Eggs that was just conforming the storyboards so that we could ship them to the animation studio in South Korea. But her sitting there and seeing firsthand the boards, that's being absorbed, and she's learning how the machine works. All right. So like don't get too stuck on the dream job right away. There's a million ways in. There's no one way in. But take
Absolutely.
an opportunity, right? Like to be a production assistant. Like I want to do character design, go do prop design. No one thinks about doing prop design, but it's so important. I mean, there's tons of creativity in it, and it matters, even though it's not what's shining on the surface. No one thinks about it as an audience, but without that, um, things don't aren't as appealing as they could be. So get in to the community as soon as possible in whatever way you can. Don't kind of dream job it because you're setting yourself up for disappointment, like the too single focus. I mean, don't like be so loose that you don't have some drive, but um, get in the door. That's it. Because if you get in the
Absolutely.
door,
If anyone wants to start something, just get to it, get down to it, and start. Start today. There is no tomorrow. That's what I say to people as well. If people think
correct.
about, their setbacks, their failures, it becomes an anxiety and depression for them. So I always advise people that think positive, think forward, think for tomorrow, look at the possibility, get to
Yeah,
solutions. Just to start, you gotta show up. So
yeah. It's a, it's
impressive.
a
Yeah.
it's an
Hmm.
an expanding, educating mindset. Whereas like I'm still learning, and you're going to be learning for the rest of your career for as long as you do this. I'm better than I
Hmm.
was 5 years ago because I persisted and I got okay with failure. But
Uh-huh.
just by doing it, um, you get better. No amount of schooling. There's some programs are better than the others. Like I've taught and told people that like you can spend all of your money you're spending on tuition on a really nice computer and some tutorials and teach yourself everything you need to know. It's what you do with it, right? And your willingness to
Absolutely.
like to deal with feedback, to deal with like not being great at it right up front. But if you're, I always when I hire people, um,
Hmm.
it comes down to their work and excuse me for this, but are they an asshole or not? Because like I will take a mediocre talent who's great to work with over a super
Hmm.
talented asshole any day. Because like that's just like it's hard enough that I don't need that because every artist is going to get better as long as they keep doing the work. So
Absolutely.
like you go do there's a place for you, you talented asshole. But I know that this person who just like has the hunger and is doing the work, they're going to get better. They're going to probably get better than you eventually. But because they understand they're good to be in this and working in collaborative, intense environment with, that matters more to me. So that's
Absolutely.
always the criteria. It's just like be professional. Um, Always strive to improve what you're doing and just get into the community in the professional community in any capacity. And if you can, that takes some time. It's all like things change right now. Animation's in this slump, with all the
It
things going.
is.
I've been doing this for 30 years. It does this. It's always up and down. Just get used to
It
it.
is. Yeah.
Um, when I started this, I was learning only 2D. We were still using Oxberry film cameras in the school.
Uh-huh.
Uh, 2 years later, Toy Story came out, and no one wanted to do 2D animation, and I hadn't learned anything in 3D. So, but I'm still doing it. So don't worry about the ups and downs. That's any creative field is going to have it. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
So, Mike,
right.
can you share a project that you currently working on that has really excited you that you can share with us?
Yeah, yeah. Currently, we are working on a independent animated feature called Milkweed. Um, it's being produced here locally. It's based off the young adult novel of the same name by Jerry Spinelli. Um,
Hmm.
and it's the first time a feature has been developed in Minnesota here, animated feature, I should say. And so we have this small team. Our art director is in Brooklyn. The rest of the team is here. We've got this legendary musician here who's our sound director. Wendy and I have been designing the pipeline. Um,
Hmm.
with the producer on, what is this going to cost? I don't know. I've never done a feature before. I
Hmm.
know how they're done. I know what it takes, but we don't have that kind of budget or time. Money's being raised, and there's
Hmm.
also an educational component because it's about Holocaust education for
Hmm.
public schools. and reading the
Mm-hmm.
book, and this film is sort of this companion piece. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the challenge of uh, how do you make a feature in a style that's not what features normally look like? The art
Mm-hmm.
director style is quite unique, but we want to stay true to that, stay true to the book, and do it for an independent feature animation budget, which is, might be like $7 million, which is nothing.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
but
Mm-hmm.
this comes back to that, like, all this, we've been thinking and talking about it for a couple of years. This is the first year really diving into the animatic and the storyboards. But it's, making those creative decisions up front, like I was talking about earlier, of like, what are we up against here? We don't have the resources of Pixar or Disney, but we can still tell a story within the budget. So what are the choices that we're making? How are we um, adapting our own pipeline to get the best out of the project, without all the frills and expenses that it would take,
Mm-hmm.
so to make a feature. So that challenge is pretty fascinating. It's like a slow, persistent build of a project.
Mm-hmm.
We set these sort of like yearly milestones. So we've talked about it. We talked about budget. We build a small core team. The art director did beat boards for the entire film. Every sequence of the film.
Mm-hmm.
The script is written. The designs are done. But like, let's get the animatic done to a certain point, and then we can start talking about hiring our voice actors. And so it's just knowing, because we can see the big picture. Now we can manage the chunks, and without losing the goal that's in the way. And it's evolving as we go, but we have the
Mm-hmm.
pieces, and now we're at the marathon stage. So
So thank you so much for joining us today, Mike. It's been,
yeah, man.
I would say, an amazing conversation. A great 40 minutes talk, a lot of insights about, Hollywood, long tail content, a lot of things. And I learned a few things from you as well, because I belong to the same industry as well. So things gonna
Yeah,
get easy for me for the future projects. So thank you so much. Do
man.
you have any feedback or anything that you would like to suggest to improve this podcast?
Um, mm, I don't know. I don't run podcasts. I mean, the fact that you're doing it is pretty great. You get to,
Uh-huh.
meet people, learn by doing kind of situation. No,
Mhm.
man, I don't know. Got nothing. You're doing a fine job. How's that?
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you so much. We look forward to staying in touch with you again
Yes,
soon.
please.
As soon as, yeah, definitely. So
Sounds
we
good.
might end up, a good collaborator in the future. Why not
This is
for
how
any
these
future
things
project?
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much, Mike. Have
Awesome.
a
So much.
great day and cheers.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Prolific Perspective. We hope you enjoyed our insightful conversation with Mike Owens. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for our latest episodes. Until next time.